She saved his restaurant without asking for a thing, so he gave her something nobody saw coming, not even his own grandson. Let me tell you about a moment that didn't just shake a small place in Portland, Oregon. It shook a young woman's entire sense of what kindness really costs. Tessa Rowan wasn't looking for trouble that morning. She was just trying to get to her shift at a small diner off Hawthorne Boulevard, the kind of spot where the coffee tastes a little burnt, but the regulars like it that way. She had her headphones in, her jacket pulled tight, and her mind on the tips she hoped to make later. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. But then she heard a crash, a sharp metallic clatter, followed by someone muttering in frustration. She looked over and saw an older man, late 70s, maybe early 80s, struggling with a stack of metal trays outside his own restaurant. His hands shook so badly that one tray had flipped right out of his grip and bounced across the sidewalk. That man was Franklin Morrell. People walked around him. One woman stepped over the tray like it was nothing more than a piece of trash. Another guy glanced once, then went right back to scrolling on his phone. Tessa paused. She didn't know the man. She didn't even know the name of his restaurant. She just saw someone who clearly needed help. She pulled out her earbuds and hurried over. "You okay?" she asked. Franklin looked up with this mix of pride and embarrassment in his eyes. The kind older folks get when they want to pretend everything's fine, even when it's clearly not. "I'm fine," he said, bending down to grab the tray. But the moment he reached for it, his hand jerked, and the tray clattered again. Tessa crouched down and picked it up before he could try again. "You sure?" she asked. "Because I'm getting the feeling you're fighting those trays and losing." He let out a dry laugh. "They've got a mind of their own today." His voice was warm but tired, really tired. The kind of tired that didn't come from one rough morning, but from years of pushing through days that weren't easy. She stood and looked at the faded lettering on the window behind him, Morrell's Grill. She remembered passing it every morning but never stopping long enough to see the strain on the man who ran it. "Let me help you," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "I know, but I want to." For a moment, he stared at her like he was trying to decide whether accepting help was weakness or wisdom. Then he exhaled and stepped aside. "All right, thank you." Tessa stacked the trays, carried them inside, and set them on the prep counter. The place smelled like old spices and memories, like a restaurant that had once been full of life, but was now holding itself together with stubbornness and habit. Franklin shuffled in behind her, moving slowly, one hand pressed to his back. "You work around here?" he asked. "2 blocks down," she answered, "at the Riverbend Diner." He nodded. "You're good at helping. Most people don't stop anymore." "Well, most people should," she said. He smiled at that, a small smile, but it changed his whole face, made him look lighter. And Tessa didn't know it then, but that tiny moment, kneeling on a sidewalk with a stranger, was the first shift in something much bigger, something she wasn't at all prepared for. But she also didn't know how fast one simple act of kindness was about to pull her into someone else's family battle, someone else's fear, and someone else's fight for dignity. And she definitely didn't know it would put her face to face with 2 lawyers and a grandson who walked in like he owned the world. The next morning, Tessa didn't plan on stopping by Morrell's Grill again. She woke up, tied her apron around her waist, and told herself she needed to focus on her own shift. Rent wasn't going to pay itself. Her car needed new brakes, and she was already picking up extra tables just to catch up. But something tugged at her when she walked past Franklin's place. The lights were on inside, but the front door was propped open like he hadn't finished setting up. She slowed down. She didn't mean to. It was like her feet decided for her. Inside, Franklin was wrestling with a bag of potatoes, the kind that came in huge 50-pound sacks. He had the top half lifted onto the counter, but his arm trembled as he tried to get the rest up. His face scrunched in frustration. He didn't see her standing there yet. "Morning," she said. Franklin startled so hard, he almost knocked the potatoes off the counter. "Oh, hey, didn't hear you walk in." "Yeah, I noticed," she said, stepping forward. "You need a hand with that?" He sighed. "I'm managing." "Looks like it," she teased gently, placing her hand on the sack before it could slip. "Let me." With a grunt, she hoisted the bag fully onto the counter. Franklin let out a low whistle. "You've got more strength than you look." "Years of lifting trays," she said. For a moment, they just stood there. The morning sun drifted through the windows, hitting the old tile floor with patches of soft light. The restaurant wasn't fancy. Older booths, a scratched counter, a fridge that hummed too loudly. But it had character, and it felt important, like a place someone once loved deeply. Franklin leaned against the counter. I used to have 3 cooks, 2 servers, and a kid who delivered orders to people who lived close by. We had lines out the door on Friday nights. What happened? She asked. He shrugged. People got older. Folks moved. My wife passed. And I guess the world moved faster than I could. His voice cracked slightly on the part about his wife, like he didn't want it to, but couldn't stop it. Tessa softened. That sounds tough, she said. It is, he replied quietly, but I'm still here. Someone's got to keep this place alive. She could see the pride in his eyes, pride mixed with years of holding everything together by himself. He wasn't running a business anymore. He was guarding a memory. She looked around and noticed little things she hadn't yesterday. A photo taped to the side of a cabinet of Franklin with a woman who had bright eyes and curls that fell to her shoulders. A handwritten menu from years ago. The ink faded. A framed newspaper clipping celebrating the restaurant's 20th anniversary. You built something real here, she said. Franklin swallowed hard and nodded. I tried. She checked the time on the old clock near the grill. She still had 15 minutes before her shift started at the diner. She could leave, or she could stay just a little longer. Want help getting set up for the morning rush? She asked. There's not much of a rush anymore, he said with a half smile, but I won't say no. So she grabbed a rag and wiped down the counter. She checked the coffee machine. She stacked plates. Franklin moved beside her, slower but determined. And then something small but important happened. He began talking. Not forced talking, comfortable talking. About how he opened the place with nothing but a loan and a dream, about how his wife used to run the register, about how their grandson used to play under the tables as a toddler. The more he talked, the more Tessa learned about a man who had spent his life caring for others, but never asking for help himself. By the time she reached the door to leave, Franklin called out, Thank you, really. Of course, she said. I'll see you around. She walked toward the diner, but the whole time something about Franklin lingered in her thoughts. His shaking hands, the empty tables, the pictures of a life that used to feel bigger. But she had no idea that this second visit was the start of something she couldn't walk away from, no matter how hard she tried. And soon, helping him wouldn't just be something she chose. It would become something she felt responsible for. That same week, something shifted for Tessa without her even noticing it. She found herself slowing down every time she passed Morel's grill. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't planned. It was like her mind kept reminding her of that small restaurant with the crooked blinds and the stubborn old man who refused to quit. Then Thursday came, and Thursday was the day everything changed. Tessa had just finished her early shift at the diner. Her feet ached, her apron smelled like onions, and her back felt like someone had placed a stack of bricks on it. She wanted nothing more than to go home, shower, and collapse. But when she reached Franklin's restaurant, she stopped cold. The lights were on, but the front counter was a mess. Paper scattered, a skillet left on the stove, the smell of something burning faintly in the air. Franklin was in the middle of the dining room, leaning on one of the tables with both hands, breathing heavily. Hey! Tessa rushed inside. What's going on? He looked up, startled and embarrassed. I'm fine, I'm just catching my breath. You don't look fine. He tried to straighten up, but his back protested. His face tightened with pain before he masked it with a forced smile. It's just my hip, he said. Gets like this sometimes. Tessa stepped closer. Do you need me to call someone? No, he said quickly. Absolutely not. I've got it. But he didn't. Anyone could see that. She glanced around the restaurant. A pot on the stove smoked lightly. A cutting board sat next to half-sliced onions. The morning prep wasn't done. The floor hadn't been swept, and Franklin looked like he'd been fighting the day since sunrise. Let me help, she said gently. Tessa, you already did plenty this week. It's okay, she insisted. I'm not in a rush. Franklin looked at her for a long moment, long enough that she wondered if he'd finally accept the truth. He needed help, even if he didn't want to admit it. Then he whispered, Could you turn the stove off? She moved quickly, shutting off the burner and sliding the pot aside. When she came back, Franklin was trying to stand straight again. You shouldn't be doing this alone, she said. He gave a weak laugh. I've been doing it alone for a long time. Well, maybe you don't have to anymore. He blinked at her like he hadn't expected anyone to say that, and maybe he hadn't. Maybe people around him had been walking past his struggles for so long that he assumed that was the world now. Everyone busy, everyone distracted, everyone choosing to look away. But Tessa didn't, and she didn't plan on starting now. "Come sit," she said, guiding him toward a booth. "Let me finish the prep." "You've already worked a full shift." "And I'll survive another hour," she replied. She tied her hair back, grabbed the knife, and went straight to chopping. Franklin watched her with this mix of relief and disbelief. "You know," he said quietly, "my wife used to do that. She'd take one look at me trying to do too much, and she'd tell me to go sit down. Said I looked like a wind-up toy losing steam." Tessa smiled. "She sounds like she had common sense." "She had more than that," he said. His voice softened in a way that made her pause. "She kept this place alive. I'm just trying to honor what we built together." That sentence hung in the air, heavy, real. Tessa understood then that this restaurant wasn't just a business. It was a promise, a legacy, a piece of his heart that he refused to let fade. When she finished prepping the vegetables, she washed her hands and sat across from him. "Do you ever get help from your family?" she asked. He hesitated. "Not really." "What about my grandson?" He finished for her. He gave a tired shrug. "He's busy, lives in another city, has his own life. Does he ever come by?" Franklin looked down at his hands. "Not recently." It didn't sound like anger or resentment. It sounded like someone who had learned to stop expecting things. That didn't sit right with her. By the time she left that afternoon, she had wiped down every counter, restocked the condiments, organized the pantry, and helped Franklin set up for the dinner service he wasn't even sure he'd have customers for. Outside, he followed her to the door. "Tessa, why are you doing this?" he asked. She shrugged, but her answer was simple and true. "Because I'd want someone to do the same for me." Franklin's eyes softened in a way she hadn't seen before. "You're a good person." "Just trying," she said. He nodded, but his voice cracked when he whispered, "Thank you." She waved and headed down the sidewalk, but something inside her felt heavier. Not in a bad way, just in a different way, like she'd taken on something important without realizing it. But she had no idea yet how much weight that responsibility would carry, or how deeply her kindness would entangle her in things she couldn't have predicted, because helping Franklin was about to become more than a choice. It would become a turning point she couldn't walk away from. Over the next couple of weeks, something changed inside Morel's grill. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, the kind of change you only notice when you stop and look back. Every morning, before heading to her own job, Tessa found herself stepping into Franklin's restaurant. It started small, helping him carry boxes, prepping a few vegetables, wiping down tables. But little by little, she began picking up more tasks. She refreshed the chalkboard menu outside. She reorganized shelves he hadn't touched in years. She even fixed the squeaky hinge on the back door by watching a tutorial on her phone. Franklin would hover nearby, pretending to stay busy, but he watched her with a grateful kind of disbelief. "You work fast," he said one morning as she swept the front entry. "I work in a diner," she replied. "Fast is kind of required." He smiled. "You know, the place feels different when you're here." "How so?" "Lighter," he said simply. She didn't know what to say to that, so she kept sweeping, but his words stayed with her. As the days passed, customers began trickling in again. An older couple who remembered the restaurant from years back, a delivery driver who grabbed lunch between stops, a group of construction workers who appreciated a cheap meal. It wasn't a crowd, but it was more than Franklin had been getting, and a surprising thing happened. They remembered Tessa. Most days they'd ask, "Is that young lady here again?" Or, "She helping you today, Frank?" And Franklin would beam in this quiet, proud way. One slow afternoon, as Tessa refilled the salt shakers, she noticed Franklin rubbing his wrist with a wince that he tried to hide. "Your hand bothering you again?" she asked. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Nothing looks pretty painful." He hesitated, then sighed. "Doctor says it's arthritis." "Have you been taking anything for it?" "I manage." There it was again. Those words he loved to use even when they weren't true. She leaned against the counter. "You don't have to tough everything out." He chuckled. "Old habits." That's not always a good thing. He gave her a look that said she was right, but he wasn't ready to admit it out loud. That same day, Tessa noticed something else, something she didn't bring up at first. There were envelopes stuffed between stacks of old receipts, bills he hadn't opened, notices from suppliers he hadn't responded to, and a letter from the landlord that looked more serious than the others. She didn't mention it. She wasn't sure it was her place, but the worry sat in the back of her mind like a tiny weight. Later that week, as she scrubbed the stovetop, Franklin sat down heavily in the closest booth. "You okay?" she asked. "Just tired," he said. "This place gets harder every year." "You ever think about taking a break?" she asked gently. "This restaurant is the last piece of my wife I still get to hold on to," he said. "If I let it go, I don't know who I'd be." Tessa walked over and sat across from him. "You're still you, Franklin. This place doesn't define you." He nodded, but she could tell he didn't fully believe it. A few minutes passed in comfortable silence before he looked at her with a strange expression, one she couldn't quite read. "What's that look for?" she asked. "I was thinking, you remind me of her," he said. "Not in how you look, in how you care. You don't rush people. You don't treat me like I'm some burden." She was the same way. Tessa swallowed hard. That means a lot, really. And it did, more than she expected. But later, as she headed home, something kept nagging at her. Maybe it was the unopened bills. Maybe it was the strain in Franklin's voice. Maybe it was the way he held on to memories like they were the only solid things left in his life. Whatever it was, it made her feel protective, attached, almost responsible. She didn't know how deep that feeling would pull her. She didn't know she was stepping into a story that had begun long before she arrived, and she definitely didn't know someone else had been watching from a distance, someone who didn't like her involvement at all. But soon, she'd learn just how far certain people would go to protect what they believed was theirs, and how quickly everything she'd built with Franklin could be twisted into something suspicious and dangerous. The day everything cracked open didn't start with warning signs. It didn't start with raised voices or tension in the air. It started with something simple. Tessa showing up early to help Franklin slice tomatoes. She walked into Morel's grill with her backpack slung over one shoulder and her hair tied back, expecting to hear Franklin humming to himself the way he did on good mornings. But instead, she found him sitting at the table closest to the window, staring at a paper he held in both hands. He didn't look scared. He didn't look angry. He looked defeated. "Franklin?" she asked softly. He folded the paper so quickly she barely saw the logo at the top. "You're early," he said, forcing a smile. "That doesn't answer my question. It's nothing important." But his voice cracked slightly, and Tessa knew better. She walked over, placed her hand on the back of the chair across from him, and said, "If something's wrong, you can tell me." He opened his mouth to respond, but that's when they heard it, the sound of expensive shoes tapping across the floor, steady and deliberate. A shadow stretched across the doorway, followed by the cold click of the door closing behind someone. Tessa turned. A tall man in a navy suit stood there, polished from head to toe, jaw set tight like he didn't have time for anything that didn't benefit him. His eyes scanned the restaurant once, landing on the dust on the window frame and the chipped tables before he even looked at Franklin. Behind him, two more men walked in black suits. Smooth briefcases, the type of men who used legal language the way most people use small talk. Tessa didn't know their names yet, but the man in front, the one who walked like he was taking possession of a room, she learned soon enough that this was Derek Morel, Franklin's grandson. "Grandpa," Derek said sharply. "We need to talk." There was no warmth, no smile, not even a hint of concern in his voice. Tessa straightened, Franklin's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "I wasn't expecting you," Franklin said quietly. "Obviously," Derek replied, surveying the restaurant again with mild disgust. "I figured I should finally see what's been going on here. And," he added, nodding toward the two lawyers behind him, "I brought people who can help us get everything sorted." The closest lawyer stepped forward with a business-casual smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Morel, we're here to assist with some documentation concerning the property." Tessa didn't like the tone one bit. Franklin cleared his throat. "I told you before, I'm not selling." Derek's head snapped toward him. "Grandpa, you can't keep this place running. Look at it. You're wearing yourself out. This is unsafe. You should have closed this place years ago." "That's not your decision to make," Franklin said, trying to keep his voice steady. Derek's gaze shifted, sharply, almost with suspicion, toward Tessa. And you must be the reason he's suddenly refusing every offer, he said. Tessa blinked. Excuse me? Who are you? Derek asked, ignoring the annoyance in her voice. She helps me sometimes, Franklin said quickly. She's a friend. A friend, Derek repeated, the word dripping with doubt. Right. One of the lawyers opened his briefcase and placed a stack of documents on the table. The sound echoed through the restaurant like a warning shot. Mr. Morrell, the lawyer began, we've drafted preliminary agreements in case you decide to move forward with selling the property. It's in your best interest. You're of advanced age. Your health is... That's enough, Tessa snapped. All three men turned toward her, clearly surprised she would interrupt. You don't get to talk to him like that, she said. Derek stepped closer. This is a family matter. Then maybe act like family, she shot back. His jaw tightened, and for a moment it looked like he was about to argue, but then his eyes narrowed, studying her as if trying to place her role in this. How long have you been coming here? He asked. Long enough, she said. And what exactly is your interest in this restaurant? Derek asked. My interest, she replied, is that Franklin is being pushed into decisions he doesn't want to make. That's your opinion, he said, not your place. Maybe not, she said, but you haven't been here. You don't know what he's been dealing with. Derek turned back to Franklin, shaking his head as if he'd discovered something unpleasant. You're letting some stranger get involved in our business? She's not a stranger, Franklin said sharply. Tessa looked at him. That moment meant more than he knew. Derek exhaled, clearly losing patience. Grandpa, you can barely lift a box. You're behind on bills. This place is close to shutting down. I'm trying to help you. By taking everything I have left? Franklin whispered. That line hung in the air like something fragile breaking. Derek hesitated for the first time, but only for a breath. Then he pointed to the documents. Please look them over. We can't keep dragging this out. And if she's influencing you... She isn't, Franklin cut in. Everything I decide on my own. Derek shot another cold look at Tessa. She held her ground. Fine, he said to Franklin. Then we'll talk again tomorrow. He turned and the lawyers followed him out. The door closed behind them, leaving the restaurant in a thick, heavy silence. Tessa and Franklin sat there, the tension still settling around them. After a long moment, Franklin said quietly, I'm sorry you had to see that. You don't have to apologize to me, she replied, but you need to tell me what's going on. Franklin looked down at the table, tired in a way she had never seen before. I was hoping I wouldn't have to, he said, but she didn't know how deep this family conflict ran, or how far Derek was willing to go. And she definitely didn't know that before the week was over, things would get a whole lot worse. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The air inside Morrell's grill didn't smell like breakfast or hot coffee. It smelled like worry. Tessa walked in and found Franklin sitting at the counter, his elbows on the table, his glasses off, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he'd barely slept. Rough night? She asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured to the paperwork spread out in front of him, signatures, legal terms, property evaluations, pages filled with words designed to push him in one direction. They want me gone, he said finally. They think I'm too old to make decisions. They're wrong, Tessa said. I'm tired, Tessa, he whispered, but I don't want to lose this place. She walked around the counter and sat beside him. Then we'll figure something out. You're not alone. He looked at her with red, exhausted eyes. I don't want you caught in my problems. You're not dragging me into anything, she said firmly. I'm choosing to be here. Before he could respond, the front door swung open so hard it hit the wall behind it. Tessa flinched. Derek Morrell stormed in again, but this time, the polite mask he wore yesterday was completely gone. His shoulders were tense, his eyes cold. The two lawyers followed behind him, but this time they seemed unsure, like they weren't expecting this level of intensity. Tessa, Franklin murmured under his breath. Stay calm. She stood anyway. Back again? She said. Derek ignored her and walked straight to his grandfather. We need to talk. Now. I told you I need time, Franklin replied. You've had time, Derek said sharply, and I'm done waiting. He grabbed the papers off the counter, flipping through them aggressively. One sheet slipped from his fingers and fell to the floor. Do you even understand what you're signing away by refusing? He demanded. I understand exactly what I'm doing, Franklin said quietly. Really? Because it looks to me like someone else has been whispering in your ear. His eyes shifted to Tessa. There it was. The accusation she'd felt brewing since the moment he first stepped through the door. Tessa stepped closer. You don't get to blame me for something you never took time to understand. Derek scoffed. Please, you think I don't see what's happening here? Young woman shows up out of nowhere, suddenly spending all her free time with an elderly man who owns property worth real money. That's not charity, that's strategy. Tessa froze. You don't know anything about me, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Oh, I know enough, Derek shot back. You met him recently. You're suddenly helping every day. He's suddenly refusing every offer I give him. He's hiding unopened bills. And now your name keeps coming up every time he talks about the future of this place. Because I actually show up, she snapped. Because I care about him. When's the last time you did? The room fell silent for a moment. Derek swallowed hard, but didn't break eye contact. I don't need you lecturing me about my own family, he said. Someone has to, she said. The closest lawyer stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Morrell, perhaps we should... No, Derek interrupted. She wants to be involved? Fine. Let's involve her. He turned to Tessa. You want to explain why you're so invested in this place? Or better yet, what exactly you're hoping to gain from my grandfather? Tessa felt the insult hit harder than she expected. She took a step toward him. Gain? She repeated. If you think I'm here for money, you haven't been paying attention. Then what are you here for? Tessa didn't even look at Derek. She looked at Franklin. And in that moment, she realized something she hadn't admitted to herself yet. I'm here because he needed someone, she said softly, and no one else was stepping up. Franklin's eyes watered. He looked down at the counter, trying to hide it. Derek glanced at him, and for the briefest moment, his expression flickered with something, guilt maybe, but he shut it down instantly. You're manipulating him, Derek said. No, Tessa replied. You are. Franklin stood suddenly, gripping the back of his chair for balance. Stop, he said firmly. Both of you. The room froze. I've made my decision, he continued, voice trembling, and it's my decision, not hers, not yours, mine. Derek stepped closer. Grandpa, I'm not selling, Franklin said. It was calm, clear, final. Derek's face tightened, and he turned away, pacing toward the door. One of the lawyers followed and whispered something to him, but Derek waved him off. When he turned back, his voice was colder than before. If you refuse to act responsibly, he said, then I will. You're not well, Grandpa. And if I have to take legal steps to protect what's left of our family assets, I will. Tessa's heart dropped. What does that mean? Derek looked right at her. It means if he won't do what's best for himself, then the law will decide for him. And if that happens, your involvement won't look like kindness anymore. And with that, he walked out. The lawyers followed him quietly. The moment the door closed, Franklin sank into a chair. Tessa, he whispered, I'm so sorry. She sat beside him quickly. This isn't your fault. He shook his head. You don't know what he's capable of. She swallowed. Then you need to tell me. Because I'm not walking away now. He looked at her, defeated, and for the first time, he said the words she hadn't expected. He thinks I'm incapable of making decisions. And he has the power to try to prove it. Tessa felt her stomach drop. Meaning what? She asked. Franklin's voice trembled. Meaning he could ask a court to take control of everything, and if he does, I could lose the restaurant. But neither of them knew yet that Franklin had already prepared for this moment, quietly, carefully, and that the truth he'd been holding on to was about to turn everything upside down. For 2 days, the restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. Tessa kept showing up, helping with prep, sweeping the floors, checking on Franklin more than she admitted. And Franklin, well, he tried to act like everything was normal, but he wasn't the same. His hands trembled more. He flinched every time the front door opened. He spoke less, thinking more. One morning, she found him sitting at the corner booth again. Same spot, same tired posture. But this time, he had an envelope in front of him, a thick one, plain white, sealed. She noticed it immediately. What's that? She asked. Franklin looked at her with a strange mixture of relief and fear. Something I should have shown you earlier. Before she could respond, the restaurant door opened. Not slammed, not aggressively, quietly. Derek walked in again. Alone this time, no lawyers trailing behind him, no papers in hand. His suit looked the same, but his expression was different, strained. Like the last argument hadn't settled well with him. "Grandpa," he said, voice lower than before. "We need to talk." "Then talk," Franklin replied, not moving from his seat. Derek took a breath and approached slowly, almost cautiously. "Look, maybe I came at this the wrong way, but I'm worried about you." "You're worried about money," Franklin said calmly. "That's not fair." "It's honest." Derek flinched. "I'm not trying to take anything from you." "Then why bring lawyers?" Franklin asked. "Because I thought you needed someone to push you into reality." Franklin gestured around the room. "This is my reality. This place. Your grandmother and I built this with our bare hands, and I'm not letting it disappear just because you want it to." Derek rubbed his forehead. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Tessa stepped in. "Maybe if you talk to him instead of trying to corner him." Derek cut her off with a sharp look. "I'm not here to talk to you." "I don't really care," she said. "Tessa," Franklin said gently, placing his hand on her arm. "It's all right." She backed up a step, but she didn't leave. Franklin turned back to Derek. "You assume you know everything," he said, "but you don't. You haven't asked how the restaurant has been running since your grandmother passed. You haven't asked about my health. You haven't even asked how many nights I've spent alone here because I didn't want to go home and sit in an empty house." Derek looked down. Franklin continued, voice softer now. "You come in here pointing fingers at the only person who's shown up for me." Derek's jaw tightened. "You barely know her." "I know enough," Franklin said. "I know she shows up when I need someone. I know she cares without asking for anything in return. I know she treats me with respect." Derek's gaze flicked toward Tessa again. "And you don't think she's getting something out of this?" Franklin didn't speak. He reached instead for the envelope on the table. Tessa's eyes widened. Derek's brows pulled together in confusion. Franklin pushed the envelope toward Tessa. "Open it." Franklin, I don't think..." "Please," he said. "I want him to hear this from me." Tessa hesitated, then slowly slid her thumb under the seal and pulled it open. Inside were several documents, each neatly stacked. She read the top line. Her stomach dropped. "It's the deed," she whispered. Derek stepped forward quickly. "The what?" Franklin sat straighter, gripping the edge of the table as if bracing himself. "Tessa," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I made this decision weeks ago, before you knew anything about my family, before Derek walked in with lawyers. This is my choice, not hers." Tessa stared at the document in disbelief. The restaurant, the land, legal ownership, her name. "Franklin, I can't accept this," she said. "Yes, you can," he replied, "because you're the only person who has treated this place with the same heart your grandmother did." Derek lunged forward and snatched one of the pages. "This has to be a joke," he said. "You're giving her part of the restaurant? Why? Because she stacked a few trays and wiped some tables?" Franklin rose from his seat, not quickly, not dramatically, but with quiet purpose. "I'm giving her part of it," he said, "because she saved it." He gestured around the room. "She brought customers back. She cleaned what I couldn't. She fixed what I ignored. She helped me when I didn't deserve it. And she reminded me what this place used to feel like. That's worth more than money." Derek's face reddened. "You barely know her." Franklin shook his head. "I know her better than I know you these days." The words landed like a punch. Derek froze. Franklin continued, his voice breaking now. "You're my grandson. I wanted you to care about this place, but you don't. And that's okay. Not everyone has to love the same things. But don't attack the person who stepped up when you didn't." The room went silent, long enough for Tessa to feel her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Derek looked from his grandfather to Tessa, then back again. His expression wasn't cold now. It wasn't angry either. It was confused, maybe even hurt. "So that's it?" he asked. "You're choosing her over me?" Franklin shook his head gently. "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone. I'm protecting what matters to me. You have your own life, Derek. Let me live mine." Derek swallowed hard, but said nothing. Franklin turned back to Tessa. "Tessa," he said softly, "you didn't ask for this. But you earned it. Tessa's throat tightened. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just keep this place alive. She held the papers against her chest, still in shock. Derek stepped back, his voice barely audible. I need a minute. And without another word, he walked out the door, not storming, not slamming it, just leaving. For the first time in days, Franklin exhaled. Tessa, he whispered, I hope I did the right thing. She sat beside him, tears filling her eyes. You did, she said. You really did. But what none of them realized, what none of them could have predicted, was how Derek's reaction would ripple back into all of their lives the next day, bringing consequences no one saw coming. The next morning, Portland felt strangely quiet. Soft gray clouds hung low over the street, and Morel's grill sat still behind its windows, as if waiting for something to happen. When Tessa arrived, she half expected Derek to be there again, angry, demanding, ready to fight. But the restaurant was empty except for Franklin, who was wiping down a table like it was any ordinary day. Morning, she said gently. He looked up, tired but calmer. Morning. She stepped inside and locked the door behind her. Think he's coming back? I don't know, Franklin said. And honestly, I don't think I control that anymore. He moved slowly toward the counter. She could tell his hip was bothering him more today. Every step looked heavier. But his expression was softer than she'd seen in weeks. As she tied on an apron and began prepping the counter, the bell over the door jingled unexpectedly. Both of them looked up. Derek stood there, no lawyers, no briefcase, no stiff posture. He wore a plain jacket instead of a suit, his hair slightly messy, like he hadn't slept much. His eyes weren't sharp or judgmental. They were tired. Grandpa, he said quietly. Franklin didn't respond right away. He reached for the back of a chair, steadying himself. Tessa didn't say anything either. She stepped aside just enough to give them space. Derek took a slow breath. I was wrong yesterday. Silence. Franklin blinked in surprise, but he didn't speak. Derek continued. I came in here thinking I was helping, but I didn't listen. Not once. I didn't ask what you wanted. I only thought about what made sense to me. He looked around the restaurant, really looked this time. The old booths, the framed photos, the faded menu boards, the grease stains on the wall behind the grill, all the things he had ignored before. It smells the same as when Grandma used to cook, he said quietly. I haven't walked in here in years, and it still feels like her. Franklin swallowed hard. She would have liked seeing you here. Derek nodded slowly. I didn't realize how much this place meant to you. Or what you've been carrying. I should have checked on you more. I should have been around. You have your own life, Franklin said gently. That's not an excuse, Derek replied. I was avoiding things because I didn't want to deal with losing this place, losing her, losing you. Franklin lowered his gaze. You're not losing me. Derek looked at Tessa next, not with suspicion, not with resentment, with something closer to acceptance. You didn't deserve how I treated you, he said. I judged you without even talking to you. That wasn't fair. Tessa didn't know what to say. She just nodded. You helped him when I didn't, Derek said. I may not have liked it, but it's true, and I'm grateful for that. Franklin smiled weakly. She's been a blessing. Derek gave a small laugh, real, not forced. Yeah, I see that now. He stepped closer to the counter. So, you really want to keep the restaurant? He asked his grandfather. Franklin nodded. As long as I can, it's all I have left of her. Derek breathed out slowly. Then I want to help you keep it. Tessa's eyebrows lifted. She hadn't expected that Franklin looked stunned. You would do that? I should have done it sooner, Derek said, but I'll do better. He turned to Tessa. And if you're still willing, I'd like to work with you. Grandpa trusts you. If he wants you here, then I want us to figure this out together. Tessa hesitated. She wasn't looking for credit. She wasn't looking for ownership. She wasn't looking for a fight either. All she wanted was the same thing Franklin wanted. A chance for this place to breathe again. I'm in, she said softly. As long as Franklin is. Franklin wiped at his eyes. I don't know what I did to deserve either of you. Derek stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And Tessa felt something inside her loosen, a tension she didn't even realize she'd been holding on to. They spent the next hour sitting around a booth talking things through, not legally, not strategically, just honestly. What the restaurant needed, how they could divide responsibilities, how to protect Franklin's decision while keeping him safe, how to rebuild something that had been crumbling for years. When the conversation ended, Derek asked quietly, "You're sure about giving her part of the restaurant?" Franklin nodded. "She earned it." Derek accepted that without an argument. It meant more than anyone said out loud. By noon, they opened the doors. Customers trickled in. The grill sizzled. The smell of onions and spices filled the air. For the first time in a long time, Morel's Grill felt alive again. Not because of the building, but because the people inside finally stopped pulling in different directions. Later that evening, when Tessa walked out into the cool air, Franklin called after her. "Tessa." "Yeah?" He smiled softly. "Thank you for saving more than just a restaurant." She smiled back. "Anytime." And she meant it. Because kindness doesn't disappear. It circles back. It grows. It creates moments that change people, sometimes gently, sometimes painfully, but always powerfully. Sometimes it takes one person to show up. Sometimes it takes two people to admit they were wrong. And sometimes it takes all three to rebuild something worth keeping. Kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you the reason someone else doesn't fall apart. Now, before you scroll away, ask yourself, who in your life could use a little help today? Who needs you to show up, even in a small way? Because you never know. Your kindness might be the moment that saves someone's entire world.